Good evening and welcome to the Planning Board meeting of Tuesday, February 14th, 2023. We're called the meeting to order at 7:10 p.m. If we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. We have quite the crowd here this evening. Welcome everyone to the Planning Board meeting. Our first order of business is a public hearing continued on the application of Slocum Gibbs Cranberry Company requesting a definitive subdivision, Gibbs Street subdivision, approval pursuant to the Carver Subdivision Control Bylaw for property located off Wareham Street, on Assessor's Map 127, Lot 33, and Map 128, Lots 1, 2, 3, 6-1, and 15 in Carver, Mass., in a residential agricultural district. Proposed work includes a construction of a plus or minus 400 linear foot roadway and cul-de-sac, stormwater management system, and off-grading to support a 3-lot conventional subdivision. Each proposed single-family dwelling lot will have its own private well and septic system. All right.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. My name is Rob D'Ambroso with D'Ambroso Law in Plymouth. I'm the attorney here on behalf of Slocum Gibbs, our petitioner. I've got John, also known as Gary Garrettson, with me, the principal of Slocum Gibbs. I've also got an engineer and wetland scientist from Beals and Thomas, Dan Gagney and Sarah Stearns, respectively. We are here for the 5th time before this board, twice to advance a preliminary subdivision plan, and now this is the 3rd time relative to this definitive subdivision plan that we've presented. Rather than recap the history, I think you're all familiar with it at this point. I'll update you as to where we've been since our last January hearing, if that pleases the board. So when we were here in January, we were directed to, well, we talked about the plan at length and why the street was cited as it is, and the focus of the board, this board at that hearing, was concern for the wetland, and the question was raised as to what could be done, if anything, to move the cul-de-sac portion of the subdivision roadway out of the wetland buffer area. We had responded at that hearing that due to the lot configuration and particularly due to the subdivision regs relative to cul-de-sac design that required kind of an oval-shaped cul-de-sac, this was really the only feasible design. Well, not this design, but the one that's been presented to you to date. You asked us to seek Conservation Commission feedback. Now, again, just to refresh memories, when we submitted the plans, of course, we would have assumed that Conservation received them and had 45 days to weigh in, but we were happy to go before the Conservation Commission informally and seek their feedback relative to the project overall and that particular wetland concern, the BVW, bordering vegetated wetland concern. We appeared before the Conservation Commission on February 1st, and we were pleased to have what I would characterize as unanimous support of that commission for the overall project. In the words of Mr. Germain, he said, "I'm good," and Mr. Savory said he has no problem with the project at all. The one question that was raised by the commission was, I think, similar to the question you had, which is there any way to keep the cul-de-sac outside of the buffer? To which we replied, as we did to you, we'd love to, but we're constrained by the regulations of the Carver subdivision rules. And they said, well, try, essentially, which we did. And what we did was we asked the fire department, Beals and Thomas redesigned the cul-de-sac to give it a more rounded shape that brought the profile away from the wetland, and we presented that to the fire department, and to our pleasant surprise, the fire department said they were okay with it. If you can see this sketch here, there's actually, I think you have this in your materials, but there are fire cars shown in this sketch. The turning radius here, they're these kind of gray, they got wheels on them. You probably can't see them from where you're sitting. But we did confirm, they ran the analysis based on the ladder truck and determined, Beals and Thomas determined that the turning radius was sufficient with this design. As you can see, this blue hashed line here represents the 65-foot wetland buffer. So we do bring it just outside the buffer with this design. I see that we've got Mr. Glines from Fuss and O'Neill here. I don't want to put any words in Andy's mouth, but I believe his sentiment was that if the fire department's okay with it, he didn't necessarily have an issue with it. I don't want to speak for you though, Andy. That was my impression anyway, secondhand. So I'll certainly let him speak to that if the board would like. And at this point, I guess relative to that issue, we would need a waiver to redesign the cul-de-sac as you see it here. If you'd like to grant us that waiver, we can return with revised plans. This is just a concept plan. Or, of course, we're happy to move ahead with the plan that was presented to you last time that had the more conventional shaped cul-de-sac and the slight encroachment onto the buffer zone. So that's where we are in a nutshell.
All right. Yeah, I watched the Conservation Commission too, and my understanding was to pull it out of the 65-foot zone, and that was almost the exact words they use. And that's, I don't know about the rest of the board, but we shouldn't be approving anything that requires a variance from another board unless that variance is in hand. So we're willing to work with you to pull it out of that 65-foot zone, I believe. I can't speak for the board, but I think that was, personally, we'd like to see it outside the 100-foot zone because that's protected area. But I think the board is more than willing to work with you to keep it out of any work out of the 65-foot zone. So where does that leave us?
I have a question.
Sure, please.
Is there still a sidewalk included?
Yes, sir.
Why? On the outside corner,
If you
could
like,
you pull it further back if there were no sidewalk? It's a three-house development.
yeah, I mean, Mr. Williams, the short answer is that we provided a sidewalk in the interest of complying with the regs. We'd love to exclude it if the board wanted to grant us a waiver on that item, but
It
that's,
wouldn't have to be the whole street, just the outside curve. I mean, it's a three-house development. How many children are going to be there? A school bus isn't going to drive up and pick them up. It's going to pick them up at the bottom of the street. I mean,
yeah, I mean, if that's the pleasure of the board, we certainly we're not wedded to the sidewalk. It really,
like I said, not
Yeah.
just the part that's on the curve.
sure.
You can leave the rest because the kids, they're going to run across the street. There's only two houses.
Yeah.
I tend to be in agreement with that too. Yep.
Right.
I don't know how the rest of the board feels
It's
about
going to
that.
gain, 4 feet, 5 feet?
Yeah, probably 6. I don't know what.
It'll be about 4 feet.
But is it offset from the road at all?
It is set offset, we still have the retaining wall.
Yeah,
Dan,
okay.
you have to tell them who you are if you're gonna say something.
Oh, well, I could speak. I just conferred with, go ahead, Dan.
I'm Dan Gagnon, professional engineers with Beals and Thomas. Yes, we could remove the sidewalk, but there is the retaining wall that's located behind it. So the retaining wall has to be set back from the edge of pavement some, so we can pull it back some distance, but it'll be about 4 or 5 feet. Yeah, it's not.
Well, it's 4 or 5 feet the right way.
Well, where are we at pulling this entirely out of the 65-foot zone? Let's say we drop the sidewalk in that area. Where does that leave us? What waivers would you need to keep this out of the 65-foot zone? Or what would be the issues in regards to this project to pull it out of the 65-foot zone?
I think the only waivers that we would need would be a waiver relative to cul-de-sac design and a waiver of the sidewalk relative to the cul-de-sac portion of the roadway.
Would the board be
I-
amenable to that?
Just,
Yeah, let me let Dan
Please.
weigh in here if I can.
just want to clarify that point. So the Conservation Commission, they requested that we remove the roadway out of the 65-foot no-touch.
Well, they said pull it out of the 65-foot zone. That's the words that were used. There were several concerns. Some of them were involved with the 100-foot and 65-foot, but their consensus was to pull it out of the 65-foot zone. was my understanding as from having watched the Conservation Commission. And we're here to help you do that. What do you need from us to do that?
We cannot make this work like that because of the requirements of the Carver Fire Department in this turning circle here. That will not work that way. We did our
Could-
best to slide this back. We shrunk the size of the island, but we cannot make that work with the turnaround there.
Yeah, we can't get the retaining wall out. We can
Yeah.
get the roadway out of it, I
Correct.
guess.
Yeah, we can get all the paved surface out if we take away the sidewalk, but we're still gonna have that retaining wall that's gonna be located within that 65-foot no-touch.
Now, why can't the circle be wider?
Because we are working between two existing structures, providing setbacks.
And what's the distance from the existing house to the sidewalk there,
We're working within the required setbacks.
which can be waived by the planning boards, correct?
Mr. Chairman, what I've said before is there is a requirement for a building to be so far from a road, but there's no requirement for a road to be so far from a building. So if the street's in place, the setback says the house has to be X number of feet off the right-of-way. But there's no provision that says the right-of-way has to be X feet off of an existing structure. So if there's an existing structure there, you could put it closer to the house. That house would be, that lot would be, at that point, become non-conforming because it would be, closer to the house.
It's non-conforming already,
So,
so,
no harm done by.
right, we're not going to extend the non-conformance of this property by moving the roadway closer to the houses to get it out of the 65-foot. And that's a waiver we're able to grant?
Yep, the board grants it. It's
Would the residents of the houses be okay with that?
Well, it's singular owned by it would, he's in attendance, the owner of the property,
Owner
so,
of the property, but
Yeah, and the fact that, typically you see a setback from a house away from the street to provide, some comfort to the folks who live there. If it's on 58, chances are you'd want every bit of that setback and then some because of the speed of vehicles and the type of vehicles going by.
well, there's only one house on the sack.
I'm gonna guess you're gonna have probably more big wheels. That's the Mattel thing. I don't know if they still make those, by the way.
green machines are better.
Huh?
Green machines are
The
better.
green, I have big wheels and green machines rather than big wheeled vehicles up there. And average speed is probably gonna be slow. So,
Yeah.
no harm done. My opinion.
As long as they don't put a basketball hoop up and keep chasing the ball down the hill.
Yep, so I guess to summarize then, Mr. Chairman, we would be willing to redesign or take a cut at redesigning this cul-de-sac without regard to setbacks to some degree in order to move the retaining wall and the roadway outside of the 65-foot buffer. If this board saw fit to grant us waivers relative to that, the cul-de-sac design and the elimination of the sidewalk.
I
from-
can't speak for the entire board, but I personally am in favor, and I'm willing to let the board speak for themselves in regards to that. And I would think that we can eliminate the sidewalk on the far side there, or that protrudes into the wetlands. I would think that it seems the board is in favor of that also, so,
Well, I'd be in favor for that too, but I mean, how far can we move that road over anyways? Any idea?
How far can, well,
Well,
it sounds like Mr. Gagne's opinion is we can move it far enough to get the retaining wall outside the 65-foot, I guess.
and that's what we're asking. Thoughts, Mr. Gasky?
Oh, I think that's a great idea. And if we can keep it outside the buffers and the owners of the property are okay with a shift in the roadway, then by all means, that's I would much prefer to see that.
It's about a 10-foot shift that we'll have to look to do. So we will be reducing the setbacks on this building and this building to make that fit in there, but we can make that work if we need to work.
And I guess just, just possibly save us another hearing, Dan, do we think that's gonna hamper the turning radius
Yeah,
of the
I
fire?
was gonna say, as long as I guess the shape of the interior,
We'll maintain the shape.
as long as the shape of the interior is good enough for the trucks to make it, for fire trucks or whatever to make it through, then.
Yeah, I don't anticipate that being an issue.
Okay.
If
Oh.
I may, Mr. Chairman, I
Yes,
can
please.
weigh in on a couple items.
Yes.
Andy Lyons, Fussin O'Neill, civil engineer consultant on behalf of the town. As the applicant mentioned, I did get a chance to review this sketch. I didn't provide any formal written comment or input, but I did speak with town planner as well as Beals and Thomas regarding this. And as the applicant stated, typical to how we basically we defer to the fire department regarding turning movement and access, which Deputy Fire Chief Jesse Boyle did review, as I understand. We'll certainly take a closer look at it when we get a formal revised plan set from the applicant and verify those turning movements and the vehicle that they're using for those turning movements is appropriate for the fire apparatus. In general, Fussin O'Neill supports less impervious cover for any subdivision, and just wants to make sure that the board understands to be granting a waiver for reducing the length on this cul-de-sac in order to do that. But as the applicant stated, the key piece is making sure that they keep the shape of the cul-de-sac consistent, so that there won't be any risk of emergency vehicles not being able to make the turn. Another important note that I want to clarify is that, as I understand, the applicant will be able to keep permanent site improvements outside the 65-foot. They will need to have some temporary disturbance within the 65-foot in order to construct that wall and the associated grading. So it's important to clarify any condition of approval regarding that, that would allow the applicant to have, temporary disturbance. Ultimately, that would should be outlined in the Conservation Commission approval as well. But just want to make sure that there isn't any conflicting conditions of approval regarding that item.
Well, it would be conditioned on the variance and waiver from the Conservation Commission, yes.
And I agree that, based on the size and number of residences in this subdivision, that sidewalk isn't warranted. But I would want to have the applicant take a look at snow storage and proximity of the edge of the road to the guardrail and the wall, and make sure that all those components are being analyzed together as you get your guardrail in close proximity to the wall. Really, it's more complicated design for that interaction. So I just want to make sure that the applicant is looking at how that's going to interact.
And make sure they identify a snow removal area. Okay.
And then ultimately, the wall will need to be reviewed by the building official. And then if the town needs Fussin O'Neill structural engineers to weigh in, we can certainly help with that review, but typically that's not needed. But something that we could provide if the town needed Fussin O'Neill's input at that time.
And of course, we've mentioned earlier that it should be more of a natural looking stone and not a poured concrete or cinder block wall. I do have one other question. Maybe you can answer this, Andy. On page C51, emergency overflow spillway, it's next to the canal there, and I want to make sure that that's sufficient to prevent overflow into the surface water.
I have the plan open here. Can you repeat the question just so I
Yeah,
make sure?
I see the emergency overflow spillway is down by the canal.
At elevation 80.1?
Yeah, is it? I can't read my. It looks like it runs down to 76, the low point.
And your concern is with the,
Well, it's an emergency overflow spillway that it's not going to overflow into the surface water that it's right next to. But that's a canal that runs right next to the proposed spillway. Is that not? Dan, maybe you can answer that question.
I think it's a ditch that they hand dug. It's not a natural feature.
Well, a canal is a ditch, yes, but it's still surface water, and roadways should not
Canal
be.
has water in it, and a ditch doesn't necessarily. But anyhow, it's not.
Right, yeah,
When I first saw it, I wondered the same thing. Like, what is that? And then I found out that it's hand dug for. But anyhow, so I just want to clarify that I don't. To the point, I don't think we're impacting any surface water.
Well,
The emergency overflow, but
well, I'll let the applicant answer first.
Right,
And then
yeah.
I can respond.
So emergency overflow is required on all infiltration basins. It is for the event that something goes wrong inside of the infiltration basin, that there's a way for the water to get out without eroding the slope away and having a dam breach. It is just a relief valve in a very bad situation. It is not, during the 100-year storm, our peak event here, we never overtop that spillway.
My concern is, in a worst case scenario, is this going to dump road contaminants into the ditch, the canal, that at some point during the year must contain water, correct? I've seen water in it, so I'm.
So road contaminants are treated before it reaches this infiltration basin.
Okay.
Proprietary separator.
Through the infiltration basin. We use the oil separator.
Prior to the infiltration basin, there's a separator that cleans out the contaminants as required.
All right. All right. Further questions from the board? Mr. Dion, Mr. Gatsky, questions, concerns?
I'm good.
All right. Yes, please, Mr.
I got
Bott.
a general question. I've been a few places, and I've never quite seen this subdivision configuration before. Do we know why we have this sort of oblong cul-de-sac configuration in Carver?
I don't know, but it's in my rule book,
I know.
so.
Well, but it's not-
I would let our expert answer that question.
well, I saw from the addendum that had Marlene's name associated with it. So I don't know where it came from. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I've not seen that before.
In my experience, I have seen similar standard details for local municipalities, and it's also a common waiver that I see granted to change the shape, as well as some municipalities prefer not to have the center island, and ultimately for all the municipalities that I personally work with, we continue to defer to the emergency services on access, as well as DPW or operation and maintenance in this case. So not an uncommon thing. If the town wanted to take a look at updating their standard details, wouldn't be opposed to that.
It's not even close to on my list, but something we can talk about.
Also, we do require a monitoring well for all subdivisions. I don't know. I'm gonna leave it up to Andy to give us our recommendation on that, because it seems existing houses and
Office structures and whatnot.
right.
groundwater monitoring well, is that what you're?
It's a groundwater monitoring well. Typically, we've begun the practice of requiring it for all subdivisions. I'm not going to require Andy to opine on it at this particular time. I'll let you look over the new plans, but
Yeah, I can provide similar language that Fuss and O'Neill has provided in other recommendation memos
Yes.
to the planning board regarding the placement of monitoring wells.
All right. Any further questions, concerns?
I'm good.
Rob, how you doing?
We're doing well, thank you. No, I appreciate it. So, I just, let me, just 2 weeks give you enough time? Yeah. I'm sorry, what was the question, Mr. Chairman? Oh, yeah, no, I mean, so it sounds to me like, the three waivers that we would ask the board to grant when it votes this project would be, waiver of the cul-de-sac design or layout, elimination of the sidewalk from the rear portion of the cul-de-sac, and a waiver of 2 setbacks to adjacent structures. Again, I can furnish language to Mr. Bott, or if he'd like, or let him take the lead, but if the board saw it fit, we could return in 2 weeks to, I think, I should check my calendar before I commit to that. If you'd like us to present designs, in the meantime, if that gives Andy and his operation enough, his outfit enough time to look at it.
It depends on when the updated plans come in. Would certainly like to give the applicant the opportunity to submit them and have us respond prior to the next hearing, but we'll certainly coordinate with the applicant and the town planner if the applicant needs to request another continuance based on our review timeline.
That's, okay. So we're gonna set it for a definite time of 2 weeks
So February 28th?
and allow for a continuance if it's requested by the applicant.
Thank you very much. Is that okay with you guys, the 28th? Oh,
If we got them to you the Monday prior, week before, is that reasonable?
I could issue comments. I can't guarantee that everyone would have a chance to read through them all. But I could be prepared to discuss the revisions.
Not the day before, you're talking about 8 days before, correct, Dan?
the 20th.
Okay.
Yeah, I can.
I'm putting this on your shoulders, Andy.
Oh, we're busy.
We'll
But
ten-
I always
all
make
right.
time for Carver. So
You know what, we'll set it. If there's any issues, don't be afraid.
Yep.
We'll continue the hearing. All right. So at this time, if there's no more questions, the chair will accept a motion to continue the public hearing for Slocum Gibbs Cranberry Company to February 28th at 7 p.m.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Gatsky,
I'll second it.
seconded by Mr. Dion. Discussion? Mr. Dion.
Mr. Dion says aye.
John Gasky says aye.
Kevin Robinson says aye.
Not a special permit?
Not a special permit.
All right, and Mr. Shea says aye. Thank you very much.
But the weather vane, that's a special permit.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day. All right. Our next order of business is a public hearing continued.
Dan, do you need another easel? Do you need another easel? Okay.
On the application of weather vane at Patriot Pines, requesting a special permit and site plan review to sections 2230, 3100, 3900, 4300, and 5300 of the Carver zoning bylaw, and a definitive subdivision plan pursuant to the Carver subdivision control law for property located at 0 South Meadow Road in Carver, Mass. Assessors map 112, lot 1-5E, 1-5I, 1-5J, 1-5K, 1-5LM, M, and I'm gonna guess this is a typo. and it probably should be 1.-5N.
We got some very interesting assessor numbers.
Yeah.
I would trust them all because they look weird enough to be our assessor numbers.
Well, it's repeated, so I think somebody hit the wrong key. 15P, 15Q, 15R, 3-88A, and map 107, lot 1-4A. The applicant seeks to append 9 ± acres of adjoining land to the property and modify the subdivision boundaries in compliance with MGL Chapter 41, Section 81W. Increase the unit count from 54 units to 66 units. Alter the building configuration to create zoning compliant triplexes. And adjust the roadway layout and lot configurations to accommodate alterations to phases 2 and 3 of the project in the residential agricultural zoning district. Good evening. Well,
Hi, good evening. Thank you. Happy Valentine's Day, all. We're here this evening as a
take a moment
continuation
to
of...
identify yourself.
Yep, sorry about
Thanks.
that. Jeff Toccio here
Thanks,
for
Jeff.
the applicant. Jim Bristol is here. Sarah Stearns, Dan Gagnia here from Beals and Thomas. And this is a continuation of our last meeting. In the interim, what's happened is we've received the comments from Fuss and O'Neill. Andy has made a submission. We've taken a look on our side at the responses. I know that Beals and Thomas has been working on them. They've had the opportunity to speak with Andy, and we're in a position where they are very, very close to just being able to be in a wrap-up mode, provided that you folks, we take a look at what some of the recommendations are that Fuss and O'Neill had. I think this evening it would benefit our design team if we knew that we were in good shape, or if we got certain comments on different aspects that would allow us to more efficiently go in, hopefully, and be in a position to work with Andy to be able to have a final plan set with final conditions that you folks, it's something we know that you folks are looking for as conditions for this project. With that, we can go through and remind people using this. I could ask Dan to do that if you'd like. It's been a while since we were last here, or if you folks feel that you've got enough of it in memory and you wanted to go through what some of the comments and what the responses are from our side, we can do that as well. So I'm looking to you to give us an idea of how much refresh you'd like, or if you'd just like to jump into what the responses are to many of the comments.
I'm gonna leave it. Oh, I'm sorry, Tom. I didn't see your hand up.
I think we've got some neighbors here, so maybe a refresher
Absolutely. Yep.
just to get everybody up to speed on where we're at.
Okay, Tom, thank you. Dan, is this, would you like to go through and go through it?
So,
Great, thank you. And will Dan need the microphone to?
yes. Dan Gagny, Beals and Thomas. So, we received a letter from Fuss and O'Neill back in, we received the December letter, yes, to which we adjusted the plan based on their comments. There were some comments about where some of the high points were in the road. They wanted some of those adjusted so that they had less a distance to some of the catch basins. We made that work. There were fairly benign changes made to the plan. There were requests on relocating some fire hydrants, decreasing the spacing between them. That was adjusted as requested. Thanks. Thank you very much.
You couldn't stand it, right?
Let's see. There were some requests to increase the clearing limits behind some of the buildings to provide the 30-foot clearing requested by the fire department. discussion of additional siltation barriers being located around these infiltration basins, which were added to the plans. A bunch of other, fairly minor items. And if they're in your letter. We can go through them if you have any individual questions, but we resolved all those December questions, and then we received Andy's follow-up letter from February 6th. The outstanding items he had for us with regards to the site design was to add some grading to our temporary sedimentation basins, which we should have no problem accommodating, and then to what was that one? And then noting that we should make sure that all of our spot grades are showing on the high points and low points in the roadway, things that we have no problem accommodating. Through our revisions, we noted that in this location right here, the roadway is closer to the house than we really like. So in this next revision, there'll be a minor change in this curve through here to get the roadway a little farther away from this house location. And then you'll also notice that the house numbers assigned by the building inspector have changed through the phase 1, and those will be updated on the plans.
Now, I have a couple questions, but as long as you're up there, Dan, my first question is going to be, why won't you renumber the manhole and drain hole covers?
We often leave gaps in our manhole numbers for field changes. So if there's a need to add or remove a structure, or for a structure to be moved entirely, we leave spacing in our numbers.
All right. Andy Lyons, Fuss and O'Neill. It wasn't a significant enough comment that we were gonna push that item to be revised.
I'm going to ask.
So,
I'm going to ask the question anyways.
being that thorough with our
right.
comment letter. So.
So another one of the questions is regarding the pond and the overflow at 119 feet. I'm going to want a more scientific breakdown from Mr. Glines in regards to that. I know there were concerns over the ability of the spillway to handle it, and I know you had changed the height of the impervious pond surface there so that to allow excess flow in case of a problem. So I will want him give you the chance to review that if you haven't already.
Which specific pond were you concerned with, or wanted to verify that we addressed?
See this?
I believe he's speaking of the pond located in the island here.
Right, and there was only a small spillway, and it had raised concerns in regards to flooding and the spillway's ability to handle that. So I believe what they did was lowered the impervious surface, if I'm not...
There were adjustments made in that area, not specifically to address the overflow. As we went through and adjusted some grading of this intersection here, it adjusted the grading through here of the roadway, so that changed some of the pond elevations. But through our HydroCAD analysis and that determination, there is adequate flow for its overflow if needed.
So if I recall, I believe that the applicant was infiltrating the 100-year storm in that basin. Is that correct?
So, yes. Yeah, so that basin itself is lined through the bottom. Above the liner, it provides an infiltrative area around the perimeter of the pond. So it does allow it to infiltrate the 100-year area above that.
And our one outstanding comment regarding that particular pond was to have basically a recommendation to have the board and the applicant discuss the waiver request for not providing a fence around that pond.
There was that also.
So they do provide a bench, which is a level area as they're grading down from the crest of the pond down to the bottom of the pond, but it's a relatively deep pond that will, as the applicant mentioned, will be lined, so it'll be standing, holding water. At the moment, Fuss and O'Neill doesn't have a definitive recommendation on whether or not the board should grant that waiver, but I did think it was an item that should be discussed further.
And I'm gonna ask you, do you have issues with the refusal to provide grading for temporary sediment basins? It was,
That is one of our outstanding items. As the applicant mentioned, it's something that they will address based on my conversations with them. It just wasn't addressed in the last iteration. It's not uncommon for design plans to not have proposed grading for temporary sediment basins, but for this particular project and some of the existing topography on the site, I wanted to make sure that the applicant was adequately thinking through the proposed locations so that the grading of the sediment basins wasn't going to require more disturbance during construction than would be required, and that typically you don't want to create a large embankment of fill for your sediment basin. So just wanted to get more clarification on how they were preparing or planning on constructing those, and then it would be easier for the town, whether that's town staff through operations maintenance or Fuss and O'Neill, will be able to verify that those are installed according to the plans.
open space, what's your plan with the open space?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about, basically, we'll have a homeowners association that will, have all the responsibility for the open space areas. We do that at some of the other properties. So that'll be basically in our response. We'll be able to be in a position to give some more specificity on that. As Andy had mentioned, there are some things that I believe are already worked out. It's just that we haven't had the opportunity to put everything together, so you folks don't have the updated response. So I think a lot of these issues, they've come to some type of accommodation, which will be shown in our response. One of the things that is an open issue does have to do with the fence and the waiver on that pond basin. We would prefer not to have that, which is why we requested the waiver. And we'd like to get, if we could, some direction from the board. If the board is not inclined to grant the waiver, our concern is that, I mean, think of how many ponds there are in town, natural, that don't have fences around them, that aesthetically it wouldn't be a good look. So if the board were to say we'd be inclined to grant the waiver, we would stay with the design, subject to finalizing it. If the board were to say we're not inclined, what we would do is probably go back in and have that not necessarily be a water retaining pond, but to right size it so that it would just operate as another drainage structure.
We can ask the board. I personally don't have an issue. There's water everywhere in Carver. Right. It's an over 55 community, and you should be responsible for your. So.
I have no issues with it.
I have no issues.
I think I'm fine with it.
Okay, great.
The old folks shouldn't need a fence. They're smart.
Yeah.
All right.
Be like Darwinism.
Now,
Thank you.
I'm expecting on your plans it was more of a generalized with the open space, because I noticed there were some areas that were included as open space that were part of the 65-foot buffer zone on the property line. I think those should be cleared up and clarified in regards to that. Also, on the north side of the property on phase 2, I noticed there's a strip of open space that runs along the back there, and I'm not really certain that qualifies. But those were a couple of my issues. Questions? I think you can find all all the qualifications under section 3950 of the zoning bylaw.
So, if I may,
Please.
I have a quick question regarding looking at the December 5th letter, number 6 under subdivision regulations, with the waiver for the 30-foot proposed clearing limits. I noticed in the letter from the fire department that they are requesting that they be maintained as best as possible. Which units are we looking at that are inside that 30-foot fire zone?
None of them are at this time.
Oh.
We're able to accommodate the additional clearing to give them that 30-foot fire break.
Oh, perfect, perfect.
So
Okay.
you'll see that done. The draft says we've made the change. so
Okay,
you'll see
yeah,
that.
I just kind of trying to get through all
Yeah.
of it.
And I can confirm, we reviewed that item, and it was a direct request from the deputy fire chief to make that clearing adjustment. It was basically near that fire access road.
Okay.
We weren't sure if the fire department would consider the access road itself the fire break, but the applicant has revised per the fire chief's comments, so.
All right. And we're going to want to outline an area for monitoring wells and numbers in regards to that. How many acres is this overall?
9.
40?
30? 30.
Oh, I thought you guys had it. There was a question. I thought it came up as 39.1.
I don't believe so. There's an additional 5 acres that isn't part of this parcel.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so maybe the math, but it's in round numbers 30 as presented as part of this modification.
Okay. We required 2 affordable houses in the first section. We're going to require 2 in phase 2 and 3 more in phase 3.
Great.
That's where you added the additional housing, correct?
Yep.
Yep.
Well, Mr. Chair, if they're adding more houses, wasn't it?
It
Yeah.
brought it from 6 to 7.
Yes.
Yeah,
So it
yeah,
rounded
But
it
you
up.
said 2, 2, and 2.
2, 2, and 3.
2, 2, and 3.
Right, you
Because
just-
on phase 3, they added the land, so that's where the
Right.
third house would
That's
be
fine.
required. All right.
I have a couple of queries. On page 5.4, there's a soil absorption system and a soil absorption reserve. What exactly are those?
Dan, you got that?
Those are related to the septic systems. That's where the infiltration area is for the septics. You're required by Title V to have a infiltration area and then a reserve area in case that first system goes bad.
Okay. I didn't know. And the lawns, the homeowner's responsible for their own yard work, or is there a third party?
Jim Bristol from Weathervane. Typically, will maintain the lawns.
And I see, other than your elegant building at the entrance, there's no common buildings, no amenities, there's no bocce, no pickleboard, no tennis. It's just a come in, go to bed, and wake up.
Um,
I mean, it's a
I,
retirement, and it's not active adult.
right, no, we'll probably come back with some revisions at a later date, but
All right.
the road system, drainage, everything that we're proposing
And it
here.
belongs, it's the third party's gonna come in and take all the leaves and all the clippings and all the stuff off-site. You're not gonna have
Yes, yep.
All right. And what if a resident has a trailer or a mobile boat or you have a common parking area, or
We do not, no.
they're not going to be allowed to own it, park it in front of the house? Or?
Right. The condo documents would prevent that.
All right. I won't be there, so.
Thank you.
If I may, in that regard, a couple of those comments, one of Fuss and O'Neill's recommended conditions was that the applicant provided at least a draft of the homeowners association agreement, and then also the maintenance agreement, which presumably is going to be part of that homeowners association. But I just want to make sure that the town and the board is clear on who's responsible for what maintenance, and then it's up to the board on how extensively they would like that reviewed. But I think in this regard, it's good to have that as part of the submission package.
Yep, and we can do that. We'll provide some of the other ones that we use in the other communities.
And you're going to provide snow removal areas
Yes.
also?
Yes.
I would also like to see, it's hard to tell from the plans here. Infiltration basins, wells, drainage and septic systems, are those included as part of the open space or not?
They are correct.
Excuse me 1 second. I'm going to ask Dan to cover those.
So I can open up the aphids here. The short answer is yes, some of them. Let me jump to the lotting sheets here. You'll see that this is phase one, for example. So there's a drainage area here that's not open space, but there are drainage areas and septic areas here that are included as part of the open space parcel.
Dan, do you have sheet 1.2?
Yes.
This is an overview of the entire development, and then it labels which areas are septic, drainage, and open space. But as the applicant mentioned, there is a couple locations, specifically the center cul-de-sac, that's really functioning as both, where it's open space, but they're also utilizing it as that pond.
At the pond, I think we can let go, but I
Yeah.
want to make sure there's no infiltration basins or areas that are going to need to, somewhere down the line, need to be dug up for maintenance and various other things that are going to limit the purpose of the open space. So, I think that's 3952 in regards to that, and I want to make sure suitable access is provided. You don't have to provide parking, but make sure it's accessible. In other words, you're not going to
Right.
put a gate up to prevent people to be able to access what is
Yep.
more or less parkland. Well, depending on how you decide to go with that, there's several options.
Yep.
All right. Any further questions from the board? It is a public hearing. Would anybody care to ask any questions or come up and, yeah, hold on 1 second. I'll let him finish writing, and then,
Come on.
Hi, Mrs. Lapham from Main Street. I'm just kind of curious, maybe more so to the builder, but like, if these are 55 and olders, I don't understand the plan, and I know we're probably way past that phase of, are we thinking of a 55 to 65 to 75-year-old when we're building these two-story units that are really pretty large? Are we thinking about, the care that they're gonna need as they age? And then I'm not one in the market for real estate, but the prices are ridiculousness. I don't understand how older people afford this. Is there the market that they're gonna be sold? Are they gonna go out that way? And if not, what do you do with them? Do they always maintain the title as a 55 and older community?
It will be, it will permanently be a 55 and older community, and the open space will become permanent open space. Now, after that, as far as the other aspects of that, that's at the risk of the owner or the developer in regards to his ability to sell it or accessibility. But I'm sure that for the most part, it's going to meet accessibility standards. And are there first 4 bedrooms, if I'm not mistaken, in regards to this?
Yes, yeah, all the designs have first floor master suites, primary suites, and
Yeah.
with the latest submittal, we've added a couple designs that are on the smaller than what has been built to date,
There's
So
2 and 3 bedrooms in some of them?
all 2 bedrooms.
They're all 2?
Yep.
And, all right, I kind of was under the impression that some of them have 2 levels. I will tell you this, I would be really upset if I moved there and couldn't park my travel trailer there, though, so thank you for the board's time.
No, that'll have to be disclosed, I would expect. All right. Thank you,
Thank you.
Phil Shannon, Bow Street.
Phil.
I'm very familiar with this. I just have a question. Is the Little Cranberry Bog on Wade Street part of the project now?
You can, you have to,
Okay.
it has to go through me,
Through you.
and then, so you ask me the question, and then.
Sorry. Through you, Chair, Mr. Chair, is the Cranberry Bog on Wade Street part of this project now?
Well, so now the Cranberry Bog and the access road, correct?
Yeah,
I think
it's
now
right
our fire
next to it.
department's requiring the access road.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the Cranberry Bog, are you talking about the one off Wade Street? there?
Yeah, the one that kind of drops down below the project.
And that's listed as open space, but I will let you, please.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, the 4-acre parcel with the Cranberry Bog on it is part of the open space. It does have the emergency access through it.
So, open space, in the context that we're using it here in the subdivision, will become and remain in perpetuity open space. More or less. There's several uses that they can put it through, but it has to fall within a very specific set. And for you, just for you, Phil, and for everybody else, I will read it. The required open space shall be used for conservation, historic preservation, and education, outdoor passive education, park purposes, or for a combination of these uses, and shall be served by suitable access for such purposes. Now, they don't have to provide parking, but they can't fence the property in to prevent people from accessing the open space lands.
No, I'm just curious because it was probably like a real Cranberry Bog up until like 5 years ago, and then they just kind of let it go. But people do like walk their dogs around there and stuff. So
Yep. So they might at some point decide to, pull cranberries off it once a year. Maybe they have a little festival towards the holiday seasons type thing, but there's no requirement for that,
Okay.
so they can let it go fallow if that's what they so choose type deal.
all right, thank you.
Nope. Thank you. Any further questions, comments? All right. So, where are we at with, do you feel comfortable, Dan, do you feel,
Yeah, really minor, as the applicant mentioned, minor outstanding items on this one. I think there's really only 3 items that would require plan revisions, which, as I understand, I think the applicant has already addressed. They just hadn't submitted a formal response yet. And the rest of our latest review memo dated February 6th really consisted of our professional opinion regarding conditions of approval as well as waiver requests.
all right. I don't have a copy of the February 6th one. The last thing I have is Beals and Thomas response from January 18th, so,
I think February 6th is in the packet. I have this reading.
Oh, it's a short one on the,
2 pages.
yeah, it's a short one. It's connected to email from Michelle.
Oh, okay. That's maybe why I missed it. Mind? Yeah, just take a quick glance at it, if that's all right, Kevin. I might have missed this one. That's it. All right. So this is Andy's, all right. All right. And there's been no response to it. So, minor, Mr. Bott, where do we sit for February 28th? I think it's,
February 20th meeting looks a lot like this meeting.
well, this meeting
We don't
looked,
have anything new coming in.
okay. This
It will be
meeting,
Valentine's Day,
it
but it'll
looked-
be sort of the same cast of characters.
all right. But, so I'll leave it up to you. Do you feel that the 28th is acceptable? All right. Any further questions?
We
Yep.
get the same deal that the plan revisions come in on the 20th? Okay.
Questions, concerns, comments from the board? And everybody's, all right, so we will, the chair will accept the motion to continue the application of Weather Vane at Patriots Pines public hearing to February 28th at 7 PM.
I'll make said motion.
Motion made by Mr. Dion, seconded by Mr. Gatsky. Discussion amongst the board. Mr. Dion?
Mr. Dion says, yay.
John Gasky says aye.
Aye.
Kevin Robinson says aye.
Mr. Williams says aye.
And Mr. Shea says aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks, Tom. Thank you, Andy.
All right.
Before we make someone happy.
All right.
Yeah, it's great. Happy Valentine's Day.
All right, what do we got here? Western Trust. All right. Our next order of business is recommendation to the Select Board on exercising right of first refusal for Chapter 61A, land at 31 Rear Main Street, Cranberry Point, map 61, lot 7A. And I will give you the floor, Mr. Bott.
We have 2 of these requests before the board tonight. So Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 61, covers forest lands, 61A is agricultural and horticultural lands, and 61B is recreational lands. We typically see mostly 61A sort of proposals. And what 61A is it provides tax relief for owners of forest, farmlands, and recreational lands. And when an owner intends to convert the land to another use, the town has a right of first refusal to buy the property. Notification is sent to the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Assessors, the Planning Board, and the Conservation Commission. The intent is to ensure that potential interested town entities become aware of a potential conversion and allow them to provide input to the Select Board to ensure the Select Board has the ability to make a fully informed decision on behalf of the town. Now, in the case of 26 Walker Street, the statute goes on to state that the discontinuance of agricultural or horticultural use shall not in itself be considered a conversion. So specifically, the use of land for a residence for the owner's spouse, or parent, grandparent, child, grandchild, brother or sister of the owner, or surviving husband or wife, for living quarters for any person actively employed full-time in agricultural or horticultural use of such land shall not be considered a conversion. So if a farmer wants to take some of his land and build a house for his kid, his dad, his family member, under the guise of them continuing in farming, that's not even required as a conversion under Chapter 61A. However, as I understand, the closing attorney for this property wanted them to follow the 61A provision for this. So that's Walker Street. In the case of 31R Main Street, which is Cranberry Point, Where there is not a sale involved, the applicant is looking to take this property out of 61A for lease. When there's not a sale involved, if the municipality wants to consider purchasing the property or exercising their right of first refusal, they would do so and purchase the land at full and fair market value that would be determined by an impartial appraisal that the town would pay for. So they'd hire an appraiser to figure out what the value of that land is. The option to exercise that right of first refusal only happens after a public hearing and written notice by the select board that they send to the property and saying we're looking at considering the merits of pulling the trigger on the right of first refusal. Most of the time when the town weighs in on exercising the right of first refusal, it's because the property's been identified in an open space plan or housing production plan as a parcel of interest or something that meets characteristics such as, adds to the open space network, provides access to a body of water that could be used for a public purpose. So what is it about that piece of property that would contribute to the community? So the planning board is one of 3 entities that makes recommendations to the select board. As you see in the forms that you have, the assessors and the Conservation Commission have already recommended not to exercise the town's right of first refusal. And now it comes to the planning board for the planning board to make their recommendation to the select board.
All right. Basically, when any agricultural forest land listed as 61A is going to be changed for purpose to residential, commercial, or industrial, the town has first right of refusal. Certain boards are required to give recommendations. Now, as the planning board, we handle the master plan, so anything that comes out of Chapter 61A should come to us as a referral to the select board, whether or not to purchase it based on our opinion on the importance of the land to the town. That being said, the only way we can give that recommendation, and rightfully so, it's how it should be handled, is in open meeting, because otherwise it would be a violation of the open meeting laws. So that's why we're here tonight. But in fairness, that there's a few people here that have clearly shown an interest in this project. Is there a spokesman, or if people want to raise their hands to tell me who wants to speak? But I'm gonna remind everyone here and out there that a project was approved on this site by the planning board, and we are bound by that approval because it was done legally and lawfully at the time. So, that being said, Mr. Shannon, if you want, I'll give you a couple minutes here. Please remember to identify yourself.
Sure. Phil Shannon, Bow Street. I did some research and I just prepared something that I could just read.
Again, we can't talk about the approved project.
I won't talk about that. Some of the stuff he already went over, but here we go. Under the right of first refusal, if the landowner is converting the use, the municipality must pay the market value, which is determined by an impartial appraiser. And a quick question, the appraisal is an important fact. Do you know if that has happened yet? Anyone?
There has not.
Okay.
No, and that wouldn't be, we wouldn't, as a planning board, take any consideration into the cost of the property.
Mm-hmm.
It would be based on the importance to the town. And I'll just give you an example, a quick example. We needed a new school and a suitable spot was opening up, or the land next to an important park or council on aging building came up, and we felt it was important to the master plan in regards to that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. So.
Oh, no problem. That answers it. If town boards or committees do not provide feedback on time, it will be assumed that they do not want to move forward with the right of first refusal. If this were to happen, it could be taken as if nobody is interested in converting the property to permanent open space. That is not the case, as many residents would like to have all the facts available to make a completely informed decision on this topic. I believe that it's the best interest of the town if the select board takes this issue up and calls for a public hearing where everybody that wants to be heard could have a couple of minutes to address the select board. It would be ideal if the town had the market value of the property from an appraiser at that time so that debate could include all the important facts. Because of this, I asked the planning board to recommend to the select board that the town pursues the right of first refusal. Hopefully this could help to enable a robust, open debate where all interested parties can be heard from. And that's it. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. All right. Please, Mr. Potts.
So this will go to the select board, so I think March 7th is that date that they're proposing to have this discussion. Has to be within 120 days of the announcement, so I think March 7th is their target date.
That would be it. Public.
Correct.
I want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. It's great to see people at the planning board meeting that, you know, in general, town folks that can have a chance to speak and let their opinions be known on projects. All right, that being said,
I think, do we have another?
it's got to be very brief. Again, I allowed one, so.
I wasn't going to speak tonight, but I just want to say something. I'm going to ask the board to go
Can
forward.
you
with-
identify yourself?
Yes, my name is Dan Farini, Carver, Fosdick Road. I'm going to ask the board to go forward with this because of the sole source aquifer that sits underneath part of this property. It concerns all citizens of Carver and all our surrounding towns to protect our water source. And this is one of the things that I'm asking you to vote forward on this proposition tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so the board, will accept a motion to recommend the purchase of 6-acre portion, parcel 61, 7A, section 14. I'm having trouble with making the motion, so the board will accept the motion to recommend exercising the right of first refusal for Chapter 61A land at 31 Rear Main Street, Cranberry Point, map 61, lot 7A.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Gatsky. Do I hear a second? Seeing no second, the board will accept a recommendation. The board will accept the motion to recommend not exercising the right of first refusal for Chapter 61A land at 31 Rear Main Street, Cranberry Point, map 61, lot 7A.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Gatsky. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Dion. So this is to not exercise the right of first refusal.
So, for discussion wise, a yes vote on this would mean that we're saying no.
That we're saying that we don't have any interest in,
In pursuing the land.
right,
Okay.
that's a yes
For clar-
vote.
For clarification.
Okay. Further discussion? Mr. Dion?
Mr. Dion says aye. I mean, yeah. Yes.
John Gatsby
Sorry.
says nay.
Kevin Robinson says aye.
Oh, no special permit. Mr. Shea says aye. All right. Our next order of business is recommendation to select board on exercising right of first refusal for Chapter 61A land at 21 Walker Street, map 14-10-0. All right. Do we have any, the board will accept a motion to not recommend to the select board, the chair will accept a motion to
Exercise
their right
their
of
right of first refusal on 31, or to not exercise their right of first.
Right, okay, perfect, thank you, Mr. Vudge. To exercise their right of first refusal or to not exercise the right of first refusal as a recommendation to the select board for land at 26 Walker Street, map 14-10-0. Do I have a motion to recommend or a motion to not recommend? Exercising the right of first refusal. This is a particularly tough one to motion, so.
If you want to say no first, yes second. If you don't want.
You're making,
You can't make a
that's right, you can't make a motion.
I would recommend that we, I guess, to not exercise our right of first refusal so that we do not pursue the property.
Mr. Gatsky so makes the motion to not recommend to the select board to exercise their right of first refusal.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Dion. Further discussion. Seeing none, Mr. Dion.
Mr. Dion says yes.
John Gasky says aye.
Kevin Robinson says aye.
And Mr. Shea says aye. Thank you very much.
Only the state can do that fact.
All right, our next order of business is planning director notes, Mr. Bott.
I do not have any specific notes. I have been busy writing ads and language for town meeting, because we are in town meeting.
I was gonna say that we
So right now, we have a 3-page ad on legal size paper for the 3 petition articles and the 8 planning board articles going to town meeting. So that goes to the paper on Wednesday, and on Friday, all that goodies will be in the town clerk's office, including the work of the solar bylaw energy storage moratorium committee, which doesn't meet until tomorrow night. So we've been very busy with that. The CPTC, as I've mentioned before, does have their annual conference coming up in March, that training opportunity, but like I said, we'd like to do some training here in-house as well. So we're just trying to get stuff knocked out. We also have an opportunity to apply for DLTA grants through SERPID. And so I'm preparing a DLTA application right now to upgrade our housing production plan. There's been quite a bit of discussion lately about 40Bs here in Carver, and as part of that process, we really need to have an updated housing production plan in order to, and some other things from the ZBA side of things. So it's been for a short month, it's been long, in an interesting sort of way.
now, when are we shooting for the public hearing on the zoning bylaw changes?
March 7th.
March 7th, and if,
Exclusive to hearings for the zoning.
zoning.
It's going
yep,
to be at the police station.
at the,
So we'll start at the police station. We'll have room and likely could continue there, because we expect there'll probably be a few people who turn out for this.
and we've made arrangements if we continue it to the next night that the police station will still be available.
We haven't yet, but we will.
Because, right, and sometimes they go, and I would just assume not go till 11 or 12
Yeah.
o'clock at night.
So in advance, is it the preference of the board to go 2 nights in a row and then see if we have to continue in the next week?
Well, I would schedule it for the first night, and if it runs past 3 hours is pretty much the maximum, and then we'll continue it to the next night, and then if necessary, if we have to continue it, then we can continue it from there.
And how is that hearing, I mean, that's, what are we looking at time-wise for the select board hearing that's happening? Didn't you say March 7th? They were having the,
That's probably why we're at the police station, because the select board's probably gonna be here March 7th.
For a public hearing?
for the public hearing for the 61,
So I think the
right?
select board has a meeting on March 7th. The reason that we are meeting on March 7th at the police station, because this room is booked, so I'm assuming.
Right. But I just want to clarify that you said that they're going to be discussing the 61A.
That's what I understand.
Okay. So they're discussing the 61A at the same time we're going over zoning bylaws.
Yeah.
All right.
Um,
But it's not a public hearing for the town warrant? Because I would hate to be in conflicting public hearings where people have to choose between, do we?
especially if a presenter needs to be over here and also need.
Well, the order in which the board takes things up is what the board can do. So, as I said, we have a number of articles. Right now, they're queued up, starting off with solar and then the battery storage. But then we could also, take them out of order and do, scenic ways.
No, my
multiple-
concern is that no other board is holding meetings in regards to the warrant, public hearings in regards to warrants.
No, we are the show for the
Okay,
warrant.
all right.
Yeah, nobody else, they may be talking about some warrant articles. Frankly, I don't see their agenda until it comes out. But it's, it's sort of interesting that both boards meet on the same night. Most of the places I've worked at, the select board and the planning board meet on 2 different nights. But this is what you do here. If you want to move it, if you want to start meeting on another night,
No.
forever and ever and ever,
Tuesday.
certainly simplifies a lot of things.
No, Tuesday night is really good. It's early in the week, gets a chance to get things done.
Yeah.
We know what our deadlines are. I just don't want to be competing public hearings for town warrant issues. I just want to make sure.
So
that
the
there's
planning
no
board has
crossover.
65 days to open a hearing from the date that the articles are submitted from the select board to the planning board. And so March 7th puts us in that 65-day window. A week
Excellent.
later does not.
All right.
So that's our date.
All right. If you're all set,
All set.
any discussion from the board? I have nothing. Our next order of business is the minutes. We can put off the January 10th till next meeting minutes because I provided an edited copy that people should have a chance to read, but we're kind of overdue for the 12/20 meeting minutes. So,
So we can send them both out. We're not in peril in not approving the minutes, but if you want everybody to see,
I definitely want everybody.
why don't we
to-
do that then?
All right.
Put both of those on, and we'll send out your proposed corrections to the
Right.
minutes to everybody, so everybody's got it.
Excellent. I really appreciate that. Any further business? Seeing none. Is there anybody that, as long as we're here, we're closing the meeting out now. If you got something to say, I'm willing to give you a minute here or two to come up because it's not very often that we're having a party at the planning board. So, we want to encourage people to come and speak. Seeing none, the chair will accept a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Gatsky,
I'll second it.
seconded by Mr. Dion. Discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Dion.
Mr. Dion says aye.
John Gasky says aye.
Evan Robinson says aye.
And Mr. Shea says aye. Thank you all very much and happy Valentine's Day.